Speaking of water, I noticed I got a whole lot more thirsty just about the time you were beginning to give questions to Mark. Not quite sure why that was, but okay, there we go. All right. Well, hello, everybody. When I was coming up here, somebody said don't speak too loudly. There'll be people that are trying to take a nap this afternoon, so we'll try to keep that roar to a minimum. I also happen to notice that there's continuing education credits for you attorneys and realtors, and if you'll see me in the lobby after we get done, we'll settle up on a commission or a per hour basis on that. I'm always glad to talk about ag and ag water. Actually, some people would say that maybe I'm just glad to talk sometimes, but I am glad to be here. And I'm reminded of a story I heard recently when we were talking about water conservation issues that are taking place around the country. There's a couple of gentlemen recently went on vacation to Las Vegas, and one of the gentlemen, it was evidently during the time when Las Vegas was paying people to roll up their yards in an attempt to conserve landscape water. And one of the gentlemen turned to the other and said, you know, he said, when I get rich, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send my yard to town to get it mowed. But we do, I think I can speak on behalf of agriculture for this far in that we appreciate the River District's interest in agriculture and in agricultural water. We appreciate that. And it's becoming increasingly apparent that there are more organizations and individuals becoming aware of the importance of those issues and their interrelationship with the other issues that we're talking about today. So I was interested to see that it was going to be an agricultural seminar, and when Jim asked me to present, I was curious about what might be happening, what the audience might be like, and he said, he said, Mark, I think I got the perfect audience for you for this presentation. I said, how's that? And he said, they have low expectations. So we're going to do our best, Jim. All right, we'll see if the clicker's going to go. Aim it there. There we go. Recently, at Colorado Water Congress, at a panel discussion, there was Mr. Newberry from up the river was talking about the frustration that he had with water issues being discussed in these little sound bites. And he happened to use the term mitigation to talk about this. He said, what is that exactly? And what does that mean? And a lot of times we find ourselves and others hiding behind these simple slogans that really don't mean anything. And as I was preparing my thoughts for this presentation, I got to thinking, I think that he's on to something there. And it's a little something that I chose to call bumper sticker politics for today's presentation. And the one that he said, that he happened to talk about was, you see people driving around with this bumper sticker that says free Tibet. What does that mean? How do you do that? And they get more difficult. Some apparently are impossible. However, some make a lot of sense. Now we have this one. And obviously it's one that everybody gives a lot of lip service to, inside and outside of agriculture both. But we have a little bit of the same question. He said, what in the world does that mean? And how do we do it even if we know what it means? Well, the first question obviously is, does agriculture want to be saved? And I think that can be answered with a resounding no. Agriculture does not want to be saved. What ag does want is to be secure in its water rights and its property rights. And it wants to be in control of its own destiny. Every organization in agriculture beyond that is going to have a somewhat different goal and a different perspective. Agriculture on the West Slope is extremely diverse, and each operation has its own goals, their own plans, their own dreams for themselves and their families, their communities. There's variation in geography. There's a variety of sizes in operations, from small to large. There's a lot of difference between Orchard Mesa, California Mesa, and Silt Mesa. You can see from the looks of this slide, there's just a few of the things that are common to the western slope: small grains, corn, cattle, alfalfa, sweet corn and other vegetables, still dairy, peaches, wine grapes. High country agriculture and livestock are still the most important economic revenue producers for the western slope. So high country uses of water are of equal importance as to those of us who use them down here. So with all that variation in agricultural operations and differences in philosophy and political parties, is there anything in common that these operations might agree upon? And I'm going to suggest a couple of things today to help us confine the discussion to some areas that we can get our hands around, perhaps. And I'm going to suggest that one of the things that we think about and use in lieu of the bumper sticker "Save Agriculture" is the notion that no one wishing to remain in agriculture should be forced out of business or to curtail or change their operation due to non-environmental reductions in the full use of their legally held water rights. Here we have to have our water. But no one should be forced to stay in agriculture or prohibited from selling their property or water rights. You noticed that we talked a lot today about incentives and public values and those kinds of things. And what this little bottom aside points out, and I apologize for those of you who may be recovering from a background in economics, this is where that comes from. But if there's value in something that agriculture or agricultural water is bringing to the public or the wider community or to a neighbor, that has to be monetized. It has to be given some value. We heard earlier today that recreational uses and others oftentimes were just thrown into the mix. There was no value that returned to a water owner or user for those purposes. That's probably going to have to stop. Those other uses for the water that agriculture only uses temporarily have value. They have value across the state. They have value up and down the river. They have value to every community on the western slope, certainly, and on the eastern slope as well. And if someone wants to save those public benefits, they're going to have to be purchased, or the right to use them is going to have to be purchased. So one of the questions might be, is it all about ag? No, it may all be about money. So many of you probably, in talking about this set of issues, will notice that there's an inherent tension in the discussion about water and water rights. And this is not just an ag water issue, but a broader issue. There's a certain tension that's inherent. And on the one hand, most of us here in western Colorado do not want to sacrifice value that we have in our property rights, whether they be water, whether they be livestock, whether they be property or whatever. We want to receive the value and the benefit that we've built. By the same token, we're concerned that if another method for trading water, shall we say, is put into place, that those decisions are going to be political in nature, and they're going to be made by people outside of our general locale, maybe far away. But the tension tends to come in is that if we grant those rights unilaterally to an individual to do what they wish with those property rights, we have to remember we got to get the whole story. Is that anytime we exercise a property right, and let's say that if one of these water rights users on any of our systems chooses to, within the limits that they are legally able to sell water, is that there's going to be repercussions to the neighbors, to the ditch company, to the canal company, that have to be considered on the front end. So sometimes we have to be careful what we wish for. If a farmer upstream from you adopts or engages in an activity that reduces those stream flows, let's say that there were a wholesale adoption of some sort of sprinkler irrigation where possible, is you have a dramatic difference in the amount of runoff and return flow that comes to the stream. All of those things have to be factored in to market decisions, which justifiably should be made, but they have to be made in the proper context. Now, there's going to be political decisions that could negatively affect those of us on the Western Slope and West Slope agriculture. There's political decisions that could benefit us, that allow certain flexibilities in the way that we use water, that we move water, that we begin to fill our own gaps. So there is a tension there, and there's a tension that's very much in play throughout America on how we handle property rights, and yet how we try to look out to some extent for the public good. But the public good is going to have to be paid for, and it's going to have to be paid for by someone other than those whose rights are in play. Whoop. So, what does West Slope Ag want? Well, I would suggest that for starters, we get this target off our back. I think we've made some headway towards that end today, but as far as I would say that the folks that are in this room today probably have a much more enlightened view of what this target means than do others. It goes without saying, ag owns a lot of water, and it's used productively for a wide variety of purposes throughout the Western Slope. Consequently, the percentage of water that we control, the percentage of consumptive use by agriculture is going to be high. Duh. That's not the issue. Is it being used properly is going to be the issue, not that ag uses it. West Slope agriculture realizes that others have concerns about their water futures, but that does not mean that these interests can assume that ag water should automatically be surrendered to provide for others' needs. It won't happen, and it shouldn't happen. I think that most of us in ag also would ask that we continue to separate fact from fiction. The mythology that surrounds American agriculture is large and complex and deep, but sometimes it gets in the way. We have to realize the practicalities of the way farming, ranching, feeding, dairying is done today. We have to realize that all of us in agriculture hope that everyone finds a market niche that will make them economically sustainable, whether that's organic, whether it's lavender, whatever it is, whether it's growing your own popcorn and selling on a stand. Those are all valuable and important concerns. We also value the fact on the Western Slope that if many people choose to live on a small acreage. Is that agriculture? Is it not? That's a question that's yet to be answered, but that water's not going to waste. It's supporting somebody's idea of how they want to live, and it's supporting a certain part of our economic community. But commercial agriculture is still going to be what drives things. We grow things that have to be exported. We grow things that will be sent to various states around us and outside of the country, so we cannot consider agriculture as still the domain of the happy yeoman that it once was. That doesn't fit the way modern agriculture is operated, and it makes a difference in how we think about it. Those decisions that we have to make, along with every other business that has to make, are fundamentally the same for every other industry out there. Plus, we have to factor in the vagaries of the weather. All proposals for alternative, unique, possibly productive uses of water have to consider the impact upon the delivery systems, upon the canal companies, and upon the legal structure in which they operate. Steve Acquafresca asked a question about the relationship of the Bureau to different types of innovative water use. It's an open question yet, but given the Bureau of Reclamation and Interior's involvement in this, I think that it's probably not going to be a showstopper, frankly. I think we want our input to be taken seriously. You know, for every time that we have active, productive farmers show up at these kinds of things, I'm grateful. This larger water community needs to hear from those people. All I can do is to be a conduit for that. But that input needs to be taken seriously, and it's going to have to be gone after and sought out in many cases. Most of us who are presenting today, this is part of our job. This is the way we spend our time. But there's many of you out here today, and many of those that all of us who are water managers here today who serve, who their main job is making sure they use that water. So we have to make sure that we go out and solicit that input and try to act upon that as best that we can. And I think it's also important, as Jeff pointed out today, that the water budget for all Colorado is going to change. And I think at base, fundamentally, is that we need this water. What may be temporarily surplus may or may not be surplus going down the road. I think you can put it pretty succinctly, I think, is what a lot of agriculture would ask of you all and the larger community, is to wake up to the fact that West Slope agriculture, West Slope water cannot and will not be considered as the single go-to easy solution to the water supply concerns of others. Now, it's interesting also that we've heard a lot of things today about a whole host of challenges to us all, and there's a number of those that are challenges, especially to agriculture and to agricultural water. And one of the things that Ag wants to do is to fully understand what's going on in this discussion and be involved in it, is that it's going to be fundamentally important to all of us in agriculture to learn how to deal with the vagaries of the weather. You know, we use science every day in agriculture and have for decades. The land grant system has been providing agriculture of all sorts with research-based information for years. And we've acted on it. We've based our crop decisions on it. We've done a lot of things and made a lot of money based upon that. We need to use that same science to inform our thinking about climate change. We don't have to understand it. We don't know why it's occurring, but the fact is that it is changing. The Corn Belt's moving north. One of the major seed corn companies just announced a $100 million plan to capture Canadian corn business. These are fundamental changes that we all have to learn to deal with. And that's why we want to talk briefly about what the Colorado Water Conservation District calls the Drought Response Toolbox. Mark alluded to it briefly. And this is all kind of subsumed under the idea that there is climate change that is happening. March isn't the same in Grand Junction as it used to be. Global issues about climate change, as he also mentioned, are largely, and as we heard repeatedly today, about water. Cargill, PepsiCo, many other companies are making huge investments in infrastructure improvements around the world based upon the fact not to try to deal with climate change, but to try to deal with the results of climate change. So people who are spending money in big ways, the debate is largely over. It's not a debate of whether climate is changing. The debate is what do we do about what we think we see happening. We don't know for sure, but we have to plan for the showstoppers. We have to plan for the things that would keep us from delivering water as a water company. Would have to plan for the things that would keep us as farmers from getting a crop grown, getting the cows fed. We have to think ahead. So we've also heard that probably next in order of priority as to the things that are going to affect our future as they have our past are politics and the law of the river. We've also heard today about ag efficiency, conservation, and the future of ag. Those are going to be incredibly important for all of us in many, many ways. We've heard that there are potentially productive and profitable cooperative alternatives to how people use their water, whether they fund them themselves based upon what that revenue brings to their operation, or if perhaps other parties will help encourage that efficiency and pay for those. We've heard about the Colorado River System Conservation Pilot Program, which is a part based largely the search for securing water rights for Powell. We talked about the basin study, Colorado Water Plan, contingency planning, reservoir management, on, demand, and weather modifications. But there's two areas I wanted to touch upon briefly that have become very contentious, convoluted, and are certainly still very confusing. One is intentionally created surplus, and the other is water banking. And I've come to the point to where intentionally created surplus, which, by the way, is a term that Steve Reichen at Ute Water introduced to us here not too long ago, is to where you on purpose, by intent, create water that you're not using for some other purpose. You know, whatever. Get away from all of the other hyperbole that surrounds it, but it's water that you've set aside to use for some other purpose. The water that was released from Meade this year was intentionally created surplus by Mexico. That water was returned down there. And water banking, whatever it exactly means, when we get all said and done with it, is the same kind of an idea about how do we create some sort of insurance policies that allow us to continue to farm, that allow us to continue to deliver muni water, sanitation water, and fire water. So I kind of begin to think about water banking as it's used in agriculture as one way to create intentionally a surplus that may be used for undesignated purposes at this point. Now, I'm not going to get into a deep discussion on the mechanics of water banking. They're being worked out. Several irrigation interests in Colorado are looking at variations of water banking and to see how they may or may not fit into particular systems and how they may or may not fit into any particular operation. If you wish to pursue this, as Mark pointed out, there's plenty of people who would like to talk to you about that. The River District is certainly a good place to begin. But there's questions on water banking, no doubt about it. You know, we have to wonder with all the discussion as these water issues have evolved. You know, we're suspicious. Where's this water going to go? Is it only going to solve problems for others? Is it going to go east? Why give it to California? Some of those are legitimate questions. Is water banking voluntary? Will someone make me whole for growing a partial crop? What if my crop goes to a cow herd or a feedlot or a dairy? Does it make sense for me to do that? How will lenders view water banking? How will it affect my neighbors? Guys on our board, when we talk about it, wonder what does that mean to the system? What does it mean to the other water users on my lateral or on my ditch or down the ditch? Or actually in the case where GVIC picks up water from us? Those things all have to be addressed. And maybe of most importance, can I lose my water? Those are legitimate concerns. But I would suggest that there's also legitimate reasons to consider the benefits that something called water banking might bring. We've heard repeatedly today about climate change, reduced water supplies, and that's probably going to happen locally. And from our perspective, is if you've got to manage a canal system that is basically a reservoir in its own right, the change in the way that water comes off the mountain is a very big deal, folks. A very big deal, is it affects how you use that water, when it's available, and a whole host of other issues. So climate change is not something that we talk about just for the individual farm, but it runs all the way back up the value chain in irrigated agriculture. And I think with this basic research that Perry and others are doing now and will continue in the future, it's going to yield some results that might actually put money in our pocket or help avoid issues and problems that we may have with changing climate. Some of that research will go nowhere, as all research does, but a lot of it is going to have on-farm, on-ditch company application. I think that it's also fair to say that many of these innovative water plans that we're lumping under water banking at this point may indeed add farm or irrigation system revenue. I think that the more enlightened thinkers on this issue know that we have come a long ways past the time to where by fiat, others will come in and unilaterally take the water that we have. It can be tough, and this is not to say that that anything is guaranteed, far from it. But I believe that most of the proposals that you heard today and the ones that you'll find if you look online or in the press realize that there has to be trade value for value. So I would offer as a possibility, into thinking about what would that look like, the government Highline Fish Recovery Program, the monies that were spent on the canal improvements over the last couple of decades have put an additional 1 million acre-feet of water back in the Colorado River that was not diverted. Deliveries were unchanged. Diversions went down. Individual farmers didn't necessarily operate any more efficiently, but the system did. And there could be some value for value there. If our interests are not damaged, and we can add value to the revenue that comes in to the associations or to an individual farmer, however we work it out, I don't think we don't want to just step over that opportunity. This debate's going to go on with or without agriculture. It's been going on in the past, and I think to some extent it's been going on without agriculture. And I commend the Water Banking Group and several others, including the River District, for specifically asking agriculture for their input, which we have provided in generous quantities. But I think that is something we want to keep up too. The folks that are spending their time creating these policies need to hear from us. We want to avoid power loss and revenues, which we talked about. We want to keep POW full. We want to limit federal intervention into these state issues. And any compact call eventually will affect all water rights holders, junior and senior. So, what does West Slope Ag want? Now, any water banking or other proposal must be considered in the light of their potential benefit to West Slope Ag and Ag Water, followed by the broader interests to the West Slope first, before the interests of others are considered. Is that I wished we could say that we would do all of this out of the goodness of our heart, but we won't. Is that we have to receive benefit from this package. It needs to be recognized that damages to West Slope Ag and Ag Water will harm the economic, social, and environmental interests of the entire West Slope and the state. West Slope Ag cannot be the sole source of the solution. Those with gaps have to make sure that they fill their gaps with the resources that are at their command. And that may involve money, may not always involve water. And finally, the debate concerning the pressures on Colorado River will continue. West Slope Ag and water interests want to be and must be included at a fundamental level in creating what our mutual water future is. I don't think we want to miss out on this opportunity to finally, at long last, after all of our complaining, to have the broader community coming to agriculture and asking for us for our input. So in closing, thinking about opportunities, I'll share just a very quick story about a corn farmer who shall go unnamed. And keeping in mind that 3 years ago, corn was about $4.50. 2 years ago, corn was $8. Yesterday, December closed at $3.49, I think. So this same farmer turned up a magic lantern when he was preparing the crop 3 years ago. And he rubbed the side, and out popped the genie. And of course, the genie said, "You've got 3 wishes, 1 a year for the next 3 years." So the farmer says, "Okay." This is, remember, corn was about $4.50. He said, "Oh man, $8 corn is what I want." Done. Next year, same day, comes back. The genie says, "What'll it be this time?" He said, "You know, my neighbor has got the best of everything. I mean, this guy shows me up all the time. How about a brand new combine with all the bells and whistles and everything? Just when I go home, and it's in the shed." Done. 3rd year, just recently, genie comes back and says, "Well, what'll it be this year?" Farmer says, "Well, I want $8 corn." He says, "What? I thought I gave you that once." He said, "Yeah, but I didn't sell." Thank you. And remember, if that's too tough of a project, please give peace a chance. You want to entertain a question or two, or go right to the panel? The question is, how would a compact call affect senior water rights? Well, I think the quick answer to it is that the insulation that we give from negative actions on senior water rights are based upon the law. And there's 3 ways at least that water and law can be changed. Legislative changes, Supreme Court, or the Water Court can change those laws. And we would probably, in a short term, if facing a compact call, if there was such a thing as a temporary threat from the compact call, an extra call, those laws would probably protect us, and they would protect us for some time. However, if those were to go on, I think that it's fair to say that senior water rights are not. And this is not to say persons might not be fairly compensated, but senior water rights are not. If large municipalities go without municipal water, fire protection, or sanitation, there will be political decisions forced upon us that supersede our senior water rights. One more. All right. Thank you.